Last Pint Productions presents the New Way podcast. The New Way contains adult content for adults, because, you know, we're all adults now, and our friends, we're just sharing more and more moments with them, aren't we? Getting closer as we grow farther apart, and, I'm not gonna apologize for it. I just get a little emotional when my friends share a big moment with me. Sorry, not sorry. I really love you guys. I'm not gonna apologize for it. I'm sorry. Anyway, get it together. Listener discretion is advised.
Being perfect is about being able to look your friends in the eye and know that you didn't let them down.
We didn't have any problems that night.
No, I'm kidding. We didn't even have sex anyway.
But that's a joke, right?
No, we didn't.
I was so shit-faced last night. I shouldn't have fucked that guy. We could be that mistake.
I'm gonna perform a procedure on you called milking the prostate.
Oh, wow!
Everybody wants to be naked and famous. Everybody wants to be just like me. I'm naked.
Will you help teach me about this? What is it? A new way?
Hello, and welcome to the New Way podcast, your one-stop shop for pop culture talk about movies, television, the intranets, the interwebs, theater, music. If you're watching it or consuming it in some way, we're probably talking about it too much and for too long, and usually too loudly.
So we can also talk about Pollo Tropical, because that was consumed this evening.
This is true. Paul was consuming some Pollo Tropical. I watched Paul.
Wait, who?
I'm sorry. We have a wonderful guest in our studio this podcast. Some of you might remember him from a very sad and lengthy podcast about heartbreak. Mr. Paul Mamalito's in studio with us again. How's it going, Paul?
Oh, very well. Thank you.
He hasn't recovered yet.
I like the like he just we just interrupted him. I didn't notice you were here. I'm sorry.
That was like the audio equivalent of a 90s intro on a sitcom. It's just like, the camera's pointing this way. Guess I better smile.
If only they could see me putting my elbow up on something and like tilting my head slightly.
Staring straight at the screen.
Getting something out of the fridge and then...
You caught me.
Paul hasn't realized, by the way, that he is on camera and can see himself on camera if he looks up above where I'm at right now. So yes, we are videoing this. Oh, that's gonna be a lot of this now that Paul just staring at himself. Hey, Paul, can you give us like a Basic Instinct style leg cross? Because there it is. There it is. This. Folks, if you're not watching any of our live editions, which some of them I have not posted yet, you should for moments like this, because those of you listening to it missed out on one of the best crotch shots we've had on air since, maybe the inception of the show, I think. No? Maybe? I don't know.
This one I just did?
Yes.
Best.
You're in the top 5 best crotch shots, right? On the New Way.
That's
I'm
probably
one of one right now.
As we are on the New Way, the last episode you probably listened to was our Oscar premonition podcast that we aired on Oscar Day. So it probably behooves us to talk a little bit about the aftermath of the Oscars.
Sure.
One of which seems to be that Steven Spielberg is not a real big fan of the Netflix platform.
Yeah, him and that whole impasse thing is kind of strange.
And man, it really soured me, because I think it's a terrible argument in general. I understand the argument. I
want to hear something from the proverbial warhorse's mouth, and I want him to come out as opposed to through a spokesperson or this is what he's planning on doing. I want him to actually go and clarify his stance a little bit, because it seems for somebody who has been on the forefront of so many like cinematic innovations and is usually on the right side of that type of stuff, I feel like it's a very strange kind of old man stance to take at this point in his career, but who knows?
Would you guys mind expanding on that? Because I just saw, for maybe some of your listeners, because I just saw it on a headline today that he wants basically Netflix movies to not be Oscar contenders, and my initial reaction was, why the hell not? If it's a full length movie, it's a full length movie.
So,
and wait, one more point to your point, like the old band thing. That reminds me of like when Paul McCartney a couple years ago was at a festival and he heard like EDM playing in the background and he was yelling at the crowd, "That's not real music." It's like, dude, that's disappointing.
Well,
people
EDM
were saying that
isn't
about
real music, but
I know. Wow, you're
it just
aging
sounds like
yourself,
robots
too.
having sex.
I know, but you're aging yourself. But yeah, will you tell me what he actually was thinking or said?
Well, so essentially, there's already a rule, sort of right now. The current standard is that you have to have a theatrical release in order to get Academy Awards consideration. But the way that Netflix has gone about doing that is they'll be like, okay, well, we're going to release it for 1 week, and then we're going to pull it from theaters, and it's only going to be available on Netflix. That type of thing. Now, Roma had a pretty extensive rollout. I mean, it was in big cities for a while, and then it rolled out to a limited audience, and stayed in limited audience for like 7 weeks. So I don't think Roma is a real... I think it's the outlier. But the idea is that if Netflix has a movie that they think could be an awards contender, they could put it out technically for 1 day in theaters and then have it be an award contender. And what Spielberg is trying to do is to change the exhibition rules so that can't happen.
And look, I understand the general idea for him behind it is there should be a theatrical evaluation of the movie for it to be an Oscar contention. But that's the stupidest thing you could possibly say, because when was the last time any of the Academy actually saw any of the Oscar movies in a fucking movie theater? The way they release them now.
That's what almost everybody has argued.
Like, I mean, they watch it on screeners anyway, so it really doesn't matter. I think the only rule should be that you can't submit it for an Emmy and an Oscar, right? Like, I don't think you should be able to. But other than that, I think if you want to make your choice and say, I mean, if somebody wants to take a TV movie, a made for HBO movie, and say, hey, I think this is Oscar worthy and not Emmy worthy, I think this stands a chance to go. I think they should absolutely be able to say, I want to submit this as a theatrical thing, which they can do, and release it for 1 day. It gets one ticket sale, it doesn't matter, and do it that way. It should be up to the artist.
I agree, but I think the other thing is that, or the most relevant argument is the fact that you take into consideration all these purists who are like, things need to be seen in the cinema. People don't realize, or at least I feel like a lot of them don't really comprehend the fact that the cinematic experience has entered the home. I mean, what you
can be sitting 50 yards away from a gigantic screen, or you can be sitting 10 feet away from a 70-inch screen.
From a 70-inch screen with surround sound and this amazing home theater, and you may have a better experience and a more immersive, comfortable and immersive experience, one that is going to make you feel better at home.
As the layman point of view here, I think it's ridiculous. I think it's they're just saying, well, these guys are giving us too much competition. We have to control that, because if it's a feature length film, like the Ballad of Buster Scruggs, it was the Coen Brothers. They do feature length films. Granted, that was like a bunch of short stories, but it's a feature length film with big time actors
and that was submitted for
music.
That was submitted. That won for did it win for writing, or
it
was just
best song?
No,
it was just best song.
It was nominated.
Oh, no. It was nominated.
I couldn't remember. I thought it got something.
Gaga won best song.
But either way, I mean, it still got nominated, and and that's fine. I think it should be up to the artist. The same as it. Listen, people get to submit an actor and actress for supporting versus lead based on whatever they want to argue it, and there have been plenty that can argue either way that were just put into a category because they had a better chance of winning it.
Like this year with The Favorite, I was just like, that's a three lead movie.
Yeah, absolutely.
And did Olivia Colman win because she was the only one who was put in Best Actress? Yes, absolutely. I think so. But you had every single right to argue that either Emma Stone or Rachel Weisz were both leads in that movie and could have been.
Sure.
Did Emma Stone win Best Actress or Supporting
Actress for La La Land?
For La La Land,
yeah.
2 years ago?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you think that has there ever been a back-to-back Oscar winner or an Oscar winner that's won two times in 3 years?
Meryl Streep has won 2 times in 3 years.
Tom Hanks.
Other than Meryl Streep
and Tom
Hanks.
A few. There's a few.
The sweethearts of the Academy. Like, do you think?
Because Hanks went for Philadelphia and then Forrest Gump, right?
Yeah.
Right. And one was about a gay man with AIDS, and the other one was it was just like a once in a lifetime movie. Do you think that if Emma Stone was in the best, they wouldn't have given it to her. There's no way, just because they're like, well, she just won.
Well,
right?
Emma
And she's so
Stone
young.
is really good in that
She's
movie.
amazing.
She is. She's the unfortunate problem is that the other two are also really
Yeah,
fucking good in that
that's the
movie,
problem.
and they're
She's batting against some heavy hitters there.
it's one of those no-win situations. Any one of the three of them winning, I would have been like, yep, I'm okay with that because
exactly.
they're
Well, 'cause
good.
I said my favorite of the three because I thought Rachel Weisz had one of the best or most understated underperformance of them because Emma Stone was a little bit more smarmy. And Coleman was definitely the showiest and the heaviest lifting performance, and Weisz had to be the one who was a little bit more understated. But yeah, I would have been fine with any of them winning.
Yeah, it was. I mean,
in any category, whether it was supporting or whether it was lead, you could put all three of them for supporting, or you could put all three of them for lead. It wouldn't have mattered.
Sure, that movie was really the sleeper hit for me of most of the stuff I saw that was up for main contention. I really enjoyed that movie. Yeah, I mean, and there's a lot of controversy we could go on and on talk about.
I feel like for the most part, it avoided the actual show has avoided controversy. They were well run. The bits were pretty good. There was nothing that felt too out of place until we got to Best Picture, and that was the only thing that felt a little bit off putting. But for the most part, I thought that the Oscars were actually really well run.
Well, I have a direct question about that because so the story,
Sorry, Paul.
As the story goes, no, Paul, because I want Paul's opinion on this too. So as the story goes, Green Book gets announced as Best Picture for the night, and Spike Lee gets up out of his seat and attempts to leave the theater in anger. And gets stopped at the doors and told, no, go back to your seat. You can't leave. You're a winner tonight, and there's all kinds of shit you've got to do after the show for press and interviews and pictures and all of this stuff. But he spent the whole rest of the evening like really fucking just shitting on there's a clip. I wish I had time to pull this clip, but he was doing an interview with the BBC. And he's like the Joker. And I don't mean it just because he's dressed all in purple and kind of looks like the Joker, but he's giddily like laughing, and he goes, you guys are from Britain, right? Well, let's just say it's not my cup of tea. Ha ha ha! And starts like literally doing like a jig, dancing. And I'm sitting here and I'm watching this and I go, look, I don't think Green
That's
Book,
racist.
I don't think I don't
A jig.
care for
Wait,
that.
he's doing a jig just because he's black.
Edit
this out.
That's okay.
He was speaking in jive.
Wait a
doing
minute.
a jig.
Okay, I apologize.
It was all
if
greasy and shit.
That's right. All right. We're gonna get kicked off the air now. No, so he's just giddily just tearing apart this movie for winning Best Picture. And no, I don't think it's a Best Picture winner. I don't think it's an amazing movie. I don't think it's a terrible movie. But what is your opinion on someone? So Green Book didn't like make themselves win. There was no they didn't steal an election. They didn't rig an event. They made a movie. People originally liked the movie, then decided they didn't like the movie, but the Academy was a little bit too late on turning against it, and the Academy voted them for the win. And this guy's just like shitting on
I think it was
their evening, right?
It was such a spread out field. I feel like so many people. I felt because since Roma was the odds-on favorite to win, I think so many people said, "I'm going to vote. It's going to win best foreign film, but I'm not going to vote for a foreign film for Best Picture." And then so it ended up by sort of weird chance in the same sort of way that Crash did, where Crash was split with a bunch of other movies that were much better movies and received more votes. Then all of a sudden you see this movie that just gets just enough votes where enough people are like, that's a safe choice.
So how many movies? How many? What were some of the other Best Picture contenders?
Okay, so Black Klansman was nominated. Black Panther was nominated.
The Favorite.
Roma, The Favorite.
Okay.
Missing.
So I saw Black Panther. I saw Black Klansman. I saw Green Book. I didn't see Roma. I didn't see The Favorite. Right? Was that
right? The Favorite.
We're missing. Who are we missing here? I can pull them up.
But to me, even like Black Klansman and Black Panther were good movies. I wouldn't.
Star is Born.
Okay, Star is Born was a good movie.
Bohemian Rhapsody.
Didn't see it.
Oh, and Vice.
Okay,
that's it.
Vice I didn't see either, but I would think like the Vice or Favorite would probably be would be the ones I would think would win. I guess my point is I saw Green Book and everything else being like not seeing all the movies. I can't really make an educated comment on all the other movies, but Green Book's just a movie that I saw and I walked out. I went, yeah. It's okay.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of people.
Yeah, so like it would never in a million years, and I wasn't paying attention, would I have thought when I saw it, because I only saw it a couple months ago, that was going to be a contender for best and then win.
But what
was it just a bad year for movies?
And I think everyone agrees on that. And my question's more about the reaction, right? And that's where it really soured me, to be honest. And it's not because the fact is maybe it's not an amazing movie. It's really not a Best Picture winner, but that's who got voted in and they won. And to like lambast it constantly to the point where you literally tried to like get out of the theater because you're so upset that your own movie didn't win, which by the way, BlacKkKlansman is not a Best Picture winner in my opinion either.
No.
In any way, if it won, it would be
better
the same
movie than Green Book, though.
I don't know. I don't know.
You and I just highly disagree. About this. I thought the BlacKkKlansman was probably the second or third best movie.
BlacKkKlansman is way off the mark.
Disjointed.
Yeah,
I
think that
I thought it was way better.
I think it's very manipulative, which is something we're going to talk about in our main thread tonight. And I didn't think it needed to be manipulative because the material is enough to not have to manipulate you. It's good enough on its own.
I feel like you guys were watching a different movie than I was.
I feel like I was too because I've heard a lot of people really liked it, and I came out of that movie just
Beth
going,
and I were
"What
just
is
like,"
this?"
because I went into it with the expectation of knowing what you and Nick thought about it. And I was just like, what the
well,
fuck were they thinking?
That might be different. I went into it hearing that this was like the greatest movie Spike Lee has ever made, and I found it to be maybe the fourth best movie he's made out of like 6 movies. I don't know, but either way,
Spike Lee's made like 14 movies.
Okay, so again, though, it's not it's just barely in his top 5 for me as far as his movies, and I'm very split in his movies in general. But the question still remains.
He's not a He Got Game fan.
I do like He Got Game. I like it better than BlacKkKlansman. My question is this: do you have should you be more gracious and not be an asshole when you're in that position to just shit on a movie for doing nothing other than winning an award other people voted for?
Yes.
Like, and I hate Crash. I hate the idea that Crash won, but I would never be the one sitting at the Oscars that you're gonna be like, you fucking suck. Your movie sucks and you're terrible, and I make a better movie.
And I 100% agree, and I think that there no person in their right mind would disagree with that concept. I'll play devil's advocate for a little bit. Why does Danny Elfman not show up to the Oscars?
He doesn't get nominated anymore.
Well, he knows he's not going to win. He's been nominated for 6 Oscars, by the way.
Yeah. But over like a 30-year career.
Spike Lee has never won an Oscar before until this year.
No, but he did win one, and he was, and I loved seeing how happy he was to win an Oscar.
Yes, absolutely.
Which is kind of who's never won an Oscar before either? Peter Farrelly. I know that's a bad comparison, maybe, but Peter Farrelly's made a lot of very popular and funny movies. And he's contributed to cinema in his own way.
Yeah, in his own way.
So there's nothing wrong with what Peter Farrelly and the Farrelly brothers contributed to cinema, by the way, because contributing good comedy is very, very difficult.
And
right?
I 100% agree with that.
Think about like Jordan Peele. You didn't realize how good he was, but then you think back at Key and Peele was so good because he was such a good filmmaker and he was so creative. You know what I mean? They were just doing comedy then.
It's a poignant point.
You know?
But I still remember actually, that there was a push. I can't remember if it was Universal NBC, but when they released Something About Mary, there was actually a push late in that year for that movie to get Academy Award consideration for Best Picture because it just kind of blew the socks off of everybody, and I believe that was an August release. That movie.
It was the end of summer.
Summer release.
Has a comedy ever won? Besides, like maybe Doctor Strangelove, did that even win?
Not an overt comedy. No, and that's something we ran way over in our Oscar talk last time, which we needed to, and we're going to run over on this one here too. But
I mean, like, would you consider like Thelma and Louise? I mean, that wasn't a Best Picture winner, but there have been tons that have been nominated. Sideways. I mean, tons.
Is Thelma and Louise a comedy?
Yes, it is until the end.
Okay.
I think Thelma.
Sideways is definitely
a comedy.
Yeah, for sure.
No, there are tons of comedies that are nominated. Four Weddings and a Funeral. We talked about that one.
They like highbrow comedies, but they would never give a lowbrow comedy. And I think there's something about Mary as a near perfect execution of comedy. In almost every regard to it. It is plotted well. It is edited well. It is a movie that I agree 100% deserves to be put up there for its merits just because it's silly doesn't mean it's there's not a lot of craft that goes into making it.
No,
great.
100%. I agree with you.
But so one other very quick thing before we get into our main topic tonight, and this is a weird one. I'm kind of curious to hear your guys' reaction on this. But we lost another celebrity this week, Mr. Luke Perry of 90210.
Wait. Do you mean that younger gentleman from the prologue of The Fifth Element?
It's my favorite. Actually, I love him in Buffy, in the Buffy movie. I think he's awesome as Pike. But I also really do love him in The Fifth Element as his brief cameo. But so Luke Perry passed away this week from a stroke at the age of 52. And every single, if you're in our generation or within maybe even like a 10-year, either side of our generation, every female you know has lost their shit this week over the death of Luke Perry. And I was kind of interested in it because, I mean, it was literally like their boyfriend, their dream boyfriend, their first dream boyfriend passed away. And it wasn't because they were like a rock star and living life dangerously and they had a drug overdose or they whatever, and it wasn't like an untimely accident. It was someone dying of complications of a stroke, which seems like a very end of life, older thing to happen. So why do you think, out of all of the deaths we've had in the last several years, did you ever imagine Luke Perry's would be this like obsessed over? Because I was taken aback a little bit.
I don't.
I don't feel like it was as obsessed over as you're making it out to be. I don't know anybody who was really obsessing over the fact that
my
he died.
Facebook feed was nonstop of
So I
people.
think,
here's the thing,
I think you're a couple, and I'm not. This is not.
I'm a couple years older.
You're a couple years older.
Yeah, you're a couple years older.
And 90210, I think, was more relevant for people a couple years older than Ben and I because it wasn't really that relevant for me.
No, it wasn't relevant to me at all.
But
okay.
That being said, I think it's also a little bit of a we live in this time of like anybody wants a reason to like get online and like do this kind of communal grief together because it's like it's almost like this sick need to like be part of like the group that's like, oh my god, we're all so upset about Luke Perry. You know what I mean? It's like it's this weird. Do you disagree or agree?
No,
I don't disagree.
I don't disagree,
actually do agree with
but
you.
there are a lot of deaths. So maybe this may be just specific to what I was seeing. The feedback, the response I saw in my feed was bigger than Prince and bigger than Bowie. As far as people
not even close.
Yeah,
Prince,
not for me.
Prince was like everybody in my fucking.
So
feed.
that's what's we've drawn the line in the
age.
generational gap, and that is super interesting to me because it must be my age and a little bit older. There were just nonstop freaking out that Dylan Walsh is gone.
Or now we know the people that Matt associated with for his entire life.
Listen, look, I have no ill will against Luke Perry at all.
No, neither do I. I mean, 52 is way too young, and he was obviously a talented guy.
Yeah, and it wasn't like Anton Yelchin was a terrible death, but it was a freak accident, right? That it just that happened.
Sure.
And then everyone else that's dying that young is dealing with drugs or alcohol or whatever it is. So Luke Perry was this kind of
suicide,
anomaly of oh shit. So this guy was happy and seemed like a nice dude. This was all these girls' first crush. And everyone posting on this thing is not anyone that has watched him in.
He's Archie's dad.
He's on Riverdale now, which I didn't even fucking know. I haven't kept tabs on him.
So that's the only reason is because my wife watches Riverdale. So that was her thing. Is she was just like, what are they going to do with this show? She wasn't concerned about the 90210 connection.
Yeah.
She never had any real connection to her. Shauna was like, oh, aren't you upset that Luke Perry's? And Beth was like, not really. Maybe I watched 90210 when I was 9, but no, she was more concerned about the fact that he's on Riverdale.
Well, that's kind of what I'm glad because I did want to get a little bit to find some of the generational gap on that because it is. I mean, I was inundated with people just going over, and I'm like, I would never in a million years have thought that if what's the one that played Brandon? If Jason Priestley dies tomorrow, I don't think there'll be the same outpouring as the Luke Perry thing.
I think an angel just got its wings.
Oh no,
you mentioned Jason Priestley.
Oh jeez, we have killed many a celebrity on the New Way podcast by talking about them early.
You have no idea.
Yeah, Ben killed. Ben is responsible for killing Penny Marshall 2 days before she died.
Let's talk.
It's terrible. He's a horrible human being. But anyway, let's talk about
who do we want dead. Let's talk about that.
Brett Ratner. You know, that's a guy I haven't heard a lot out of.
Scatman Jones. Sorry.
Anyway, let's get to our topic of the night, and our topic is it's just
See, here's
I get choked up when I think about what we're about to share with everyone here tonight. It's just I'm just glad that I'm just glad that I can do this with my two of my best friends. Because I just I'm sorry. I love you guys.
Love you too.
Yeah, anyway, this is Ben, why don't you tell us what our episode's about tonight? So you suggested it.
As we mentioned earlier, obvious, if you haven't listened to it, you should maybe listen to the Heartbreak episode that Paul was on previously, because it was great. It was very enlightening, and
it's great.
It was great. And Paul talked about the movie Her, Spike Jonze's Her, quite a bit, which it's a great movie.
Quite a bit.
And it's a heartbreaking movie. But it actually had me more interested because heartbreak is one singular form of like this.
What is happening here?
Wait. Paul is pantomiming right now. He says he wants a drink.
There we go.
So the Dickie's Rye is going over the computer monitor. Don't spill.
I was trying to do it incognito so no one could see.
Rose so silently.
Spill.
He rose so silently.
At first, I was just like, he has to piss, but he's asking me to pause it in the middle of my little intro.
You can just leave it on the table for right now. I'm good. I'm good for a little bit.
Okay.
Oh, no, okay.
Okay. He's passing it back
Next
over.
time I rise up slowly, you know what I'm doing.
I just like because
slowly.
I have a bank of monitors in front of me, so I'm just listening to Ben talk, and I slowly see like a couple of black hairs appearing on the other end of the monitor. I'm not sure what's happening, but
anyways,
that's amazing.
My question about the Heartbreak episode was that is a singular emotion, something that we talked about in movies we walk away from. But one of the reasons why movies exist as a medium is because they are there to elicit an emotional response from us. And so I know that I have personally... Okay, yeah. Play, yeah. Let the music swell so you can get that real emotional impact from what I'm saying. But it is true that the movies are master manipulators of emotion when they're made well. And I think that most good movies try to anticipate what an audience is expecting and try to make the most of the whatever emotion is that they're trying to draw out of the intended audience. But
sure.
So what I wanted to talk about was movies that we felt emotion about. But emotion doesn't mean you have to be sad. Emotion can mean joy. It can mean overt joy. It can also it can mean the feeling of futility or the feeling of just being angry. I mean, there's tons of different types of emotions, because I've had very visceral emotional reactions that did not have a thing to do with heartbreak. As a matter of fact, I've completely done away with heartbreak from this conversation altogether.
Now, see, that's a little different than I read a little bit of your pitching more. I thought you were still looking for a sad emotional response.
No,
just not heartbreak.
I literally said angry.
Angry. Yeah. But I mean, I didn't.
Joy.
I didn't think joy. I don't remember the joy side. I might have not.
So
read properly.
you were completely extricating joy as an emotion,
as I always
as
do.
An emotional response.
I'm not a very joyful man. But no, I wanted look. So there are movies. Let's kind of take a step back for a second, right? So this still works for what you're talking about, right? Whether you wanted something so like the Bohemian Rhapsody movie is not a great movie, but it definitely elicits a feeling of joy by the end of the picture because it's reveling in this kind of like big.
Paul hasn't seen it, but yes, I 100% agree with you because the idea is to elicit joy in that movie.
So when I'm talking about a movie that is working to make you feel something, whatever that feel is, I think that it all comes down to manipulation, right? And I think it's two sides of manipulation. How open to that manipulation you are based on these two merits: the merit of the film and what emotional space you are in and what baggage you are bringing to the film when you see it.
100%.
At the specific time that you see it, right? So, and a really interesting example came up when Nick and I went and saw Les Mis.
Oh my God, I literally was just going to talk about
So Ben, you're a gigantic Les Mis fan. You're the only reason I got to go to the show. Who do you feel is the most heartbreaking character in that show?
Javert.
So that's very interesting. Who do you think, Paul?
I mean,
who hurts you the most?
Fantine.
See,
Fantine.
So Nick and I 100% said Eponine, right?
Yeah.
And do you know why we say Eponine? Because I can't identify with any of the problems of any of the other characters in that show, but I can identify with Eponines. I can identify with being in a situation where you love someone that doesn't love you, and you help them with this other person, and then it rips you apart, right? And I think a lot of people respond. Eponine should be.
And I can identify with being a single mother losing her teeth and
the Nick Santa Croce
having
story.
sex with people in a stable.
And Ben has killed a lot of people in his desire to get justice. So
he's more like the Russell Crowe version, like thinks he can sing but can't really.
No, that's me. No, I know I can't sing.
Don't say
I do
another
anyway.
word, Paul Manolito.
No, you're not strained enough. You're not strained enough. But yeah, I think that's really what it comes down to: is how well does the movie make you feel? And were you bringing something unduly to the movie based on the day you saw it or what happened to you that week in that situation?
But I think that I still think the primary design of a lot of movies, a lot of directors will be pretty overt, whether it's in their messaging or whether them just telling you after the fact, like I'm trying to go for this emotion. And I think, and I have a few different emotions. Some of the things that we're trying to elicit, I think that I want to go through in a couple of examples therein. But I did think one of the interesting things is I was thinking about joy, like overt joy. And I feel like the most joyful movies and the best I've felt walking out of movies are usually movies where you still have that strong arc where there's that low point in the middle.
Sure.
I'm going to throw out one that's not one of my favorite movies of all time, but is I think one of the biggest kind of tear-baiting movies of all time from a joy perspective, which is It's a Wonderful Life. Frank Capra's It's a Wonderful Life. So you think about a movie where a guy's about to commit suicide and then basically sees the life that unlived, the life without him, and at the end it becomes this sort of wonderful revelation of this is how wonderful life is. And that movie just slays people. Now, like I said, I'm not the hugest fan of the movie. It's actually one of my least favorite Capra movies I've ever seen. And, it wasn't really that popular when it came out.
No, it made it on. It was another TNT one of those ones. Yeah,
it was one of the ones that made it through reruns. But I would think it's a really good example of a movie that is there. It is designed to elicit joy. It is designed for a singular purpose to make people feel happy and feel uplifted when they come out of the movie. And I haven't seen a movie like that in a long time until I saw Mary Poppins. And Mary Poppins was actually one of the movie that made me think about this topic more than anything else, is because and as Nick and I agreed, there was nothing in that movie. You had the arc, you had the low point of the arc, but there was nothing in that movie that wasn't designed to be joyful. And it's been so long since I've walked out of the movie just being like, I feel like $1 million fucking bucks. Like, I just am so happy right now.
And we talked about this a little bit a couple episodes ago, but I feel the same way about the TV show Crashing that's on right now on HBO. And
I just started watching that. It's so good.
It's really good.
So what I like about Crashing is that you think going into the show, it's like every other comic show you've seen. Maybe it's acerbic and cynical like Seinfeld, or it's whatever. And what I love about Crashing is it is 100% Pete Holmes. It is funny, it's awkward, it's uncomfortable, but at the end of every episode, it's his kind of indomitable spirit of growth that by the end of every episode, you're like, fuck, things are bad, but God, his demeanor and how he's changing and how he's growing is super uplifting to watch and say, like, this is a guy going through a lot of shit that is going to find his way. And that's super interesting to me. Now, what about you, Paul? Do you have anything that is a super happy response for you other than her? We're not allowed to talk about her
No,
for
I know.
another year and a half, by the way.
I
licensing
apologize.
rights.
The censors came in.
I apologize.
Never apologize.
Talk about movies that hit you at a certain spot at a certain point in your life. That was it. All right. Sorry.
This
Damn.
is true.
Okay. Well, I'm just. I guess I had more of the sad vibe coming in
That's
here.
okay.
But now that you said it, I think the most joyful movie I have that I can come up at the top of my head was Road Trip.
Nice.
And the reason why was it came out, I think it was either my senior in high school or
Came out in 2000.
okay, so I graduated high school in '99, but I went to Palm Beach State College for a year and a half before I switched over to FSU.
Okay.
And actually for 2 years. So that was like they came out right when I was like I before that I had never really known if I was going to go away to school. I didn't really care about college. I was just like this, kid that just was like going through high school with no real direction. And I remember I had made the decision like prior. I was like, okay, I'm going to try it. I'm going to finish up. I'm going to switch over and I'll go to FSU after I get my AA degree and all that kind of stuff. And that movie came out and I would just watch it. I watched it the first time and I just watch it over and over, and it just gave me such like excitement about going away to school. Because like, he got to school and he immediately met this gorgeous girl who was just like, who was Amy Smart, who was beautiful, and just liked him for him. And even though he was like not that cool and not that awesome, and he was having so much fun with his friends, and they were going on these road trips and doing all this crazy stuff, and it just made me feel like that excitement for the first time about actually going away to college. I had never felt that before because I had never really thought about it as an option.
That's a good response.
And that's an anticipatory.
Plus, I had a girlfriend. I had a girlfriend that I really didn't like anymore. The whole idea of like getting away from her and meeting Amy Smart was fucking incredible to me.
I completely forgot what was her name. Her first name.
I know it was Stephanie. Not that she's listening to this.
No. I still. He was sitting
She
there.
go to the University of Austin, Massachusetts.
Austin, Massachusetts.
Utica.
That is a fantastic response. What's funny is that most of even the movies I put on my list as like sad emotional feels, they are positive films. They have a positive message at the end, but I find myself very emotionally wrought watching them.
I apologize if I didn't clarify, because I mean we are going to go. I wanted to run the gamut here, but I am thinking about the extremes in the spectrum. I'm thinking about the movies that we do think about, like where we walk out. Because there are lots of movies that I think of while we're on the topic of joy, where I don't feel like they're necessarily joyful movies in their totality, but I walk out of the theater feeling good.
Okay, I'm so with you on most of my flicks.
So one of those goes back to one of the ones we talked about in the Heartbreak episode, which is 500 Days of Summer, which is a movie I feel good about when I leave. Like because I never really had the ire.
Well, I'm glad you did, Ben,
for the Summer character as much as a lot of other people did.
For you.
But others. So, for example, one that I feel like it was one of the most depressing movies I've ever seen, but also one that just gives me so much life when I watch. And I know you're going to hate the fact I say this, is Magnolia. I really feel happy when I watch that movie in its totality. I'm not talking about just watching the death scenes or just watching.
I completely agree. That movie is a very positive message by the end of that.
But by the end, when you realize that this is about interconnectivity and it's about feeling like you're part of being something. And the last shot of that movie, and I hate the fact that I forget the actress's name, but it's that long push in where John C. Reilly is talking to
Melora
her.
Walters.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's just her looking up and right at the camera and smiling, and it cuts to black. It makes you walk away with that feeling, some level of just like there is hope, like there is this like hope and positivity in the world.
And I on your behest, I rewatched that movie 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So it was a movie my brother and I argued about a lot because I thought I thought it was overindulgent and kind of ridiculous.
It's still overindulgent,
which it 100% is. But I have a better because it's one of those movies. I remember the beginning of that movie, the vignette with
the opening.
Well, no, there's two parts. There's the vignette with Ricky Jay narrating about all of the three things, but then there's the introduction to all of the characters, which is fucking
it's amazing,
flawlessly done. And then I remember kind of losing a little bit of steam with, especially with Julianne Moore's character, specifically with her character, a lot of that. And then everyone goes, "Oh, you didn't like it because of the frogs." I'm like, I fucking love the frog. The frogs is my favorite part of that movie.
You said this before,
I love that kind of shit. But yeah, I still dig that one. The one I have to talk about is, and we've maybe flirted with it a little bit on the podcast. I don't think you've ever seen it, Ben. I don't think you've ever seen it, Paul. But this is this is just a weird movie that stuck with me like hard upon the first viewing, and I watched it a lot after. And it's called In America.
Yeah, no, In America was done by
what's his name? The Irish
Stephen Frears.
That might be right. I meant to pull up the stats on it, but I want to more talk about it's a very strange movie.
I think it's
general.
Stephen Frears.
You might be correct with that. If you want to look that up,
I'm looking it up.
But the movie is basically about this immigrant family from Ireland that like uses every penny they have to move to New York City in what is loosely like the 80s. They don't really tell you what time period you're at, and they kind of flirt with a little bit of things that don't necessarily add up as far as what's going on. But it's this husband and his wife and their two girls, and they cast real little girls. Who's
Jim Sheridan.
Sheridan, that's it. That's correct. And so they come to America, and it's basically they're like the husband wants to be an actor, the wife is like doing kind of like menial jobs, and then there's a Jaimin Hans who plays this artist that lives in their building that's dying of AIDS, right? And it's total Oscar bait. It is totally manipulative, and it works on every fucking level from top to bottom. And it's one of those movies that I remember watching it the first time and being like, I know I'm being fucked with. Like, I know I'm purposely being dragged through some emotions. And I remember I used to say about the movie is the only movie I've ever watched where I cried at 5 different moments in the movie, and I still probably tear up at 5 different moments in the movie, including one of the girls singing Desperado at like a karaoke bar at one point, and it fucking kills me even thinking about it. But the end message of the movie is so hopeful and positive, and it's the little girl making her like keeps making these wishes during the movie, and she makes the last wish at the end for this one thing to not go wrong for the family. I don't want to ruin it, but
or like Away We Go, same deal. It's like a movie that will tear you apart. The whole movie is about dysfunctional relationships and people kind of falling apart and getting back together, except for the main character and his wife, or the main character and her husband and their unborn child. But
Ben Wilson has a knack for suggesting movies to me that he knows are going to get some response, but I don't think he ever is quite understanding like how fucked up I've gotten over things he suggested, including another one on my list. Do you think you can name the next one on my list?
Me, Earl, and the Dying Girl?
That's entirely correct, Ben Wilson. Thank you very much for that.
I think you showed me that years ago.
No, it only came out a couple of years ago.
Maybe you told me about it?
Yeah, Ben told me about it, and so I think a sleepy Sunday afternoon, I decided to pop on.
Who's in that?
Olivia Cook, a
great Paul Rudd's in Perks of Being a Wildflower.
No, it's isn't it
The Punisher, John Barenthal.
Yeah, and then John Barenthal's in it, but also isn't
Ron Swanson.
Yeah, there you go.
No, so that's another. So, In America is interesting to me because I did the same thing with In America that you did to me with with Me, Earl, and the Dying Girls. I reckon my buddy from high school, Helgi Pedersen, who I'm going to see in a weekend from now, I recommended In America to him. And he like decided to just pop it on some afternoon. It's back. We were just out of college. I think he was still living at home with his mom, and his mom walks in to like their house, and he's like sobbing uncontrollably on the couch.
We'll get to a story like that.
That's your Requiem for a Dream story.
Well, yeah. But
I've got a movie that I know makes Ben cry every time, and I bet he doesn't even remember.
What is it?
Debbie Does Dallas too?
No. Remember the Titans. No, not Remember the Titans.
No. Friday Night Lights.
Friday Night Lights.
No, Friday Night Lights absolutely
Really?
makes me cry.
Okay, so he was sitting Indian style watching, and I get it because it's a sad part. He was sitting Indian style
At the
watching
end of that
at the end of the
movie.
movie at our house that we lived in years and years ago. And he's a little drunk, but he's like watching it. He's sitting Indian style, and the part where they come up a little bit short, and the quarterback starts slamming his fist on the ground. He's crying.
He's banging his head back against the
Ben just looks at me and
locker.
goes, "It's so sad," like bawling. And I'm like, it is sad. It is sad for sure.
Well, it was a really well done movie. So here's the actual. This is an interesting little film fact. People don't realize that Peter Berg's cousin is the guy who wrote Friday Night Lights in 1989. So, that's true story.
I would have to know who Peter Berg is to know.
So
who
Peter Berg is
Friday
the
Night
director
Lights.
of Friday Night
and
Lights,
a very bad movie called Very Bad Things,
Okay.
a very great movie,
and a very bad movie called Battleship.
a very bad movie called Battleship. Yeah, that's true. No, Peter Berg's he's a very famous film director, but his cousin was the Pulitzer Prize winning author, was the big guy in the family who wrote Friday Night Lights in 1989. And people don't realize how old that movie was or how old that book was when it came out, because the movie adaptation came out a good 13 years later.
Early 2000s, yeah.
It was a passion project for Peter Berg. Peter Berg was an actor. He had directed. I think Very Bad Things was his first movie. Actually.
I think that was his first movie. Yeah, should have been his last movie, but
that's a very good movie. Actually, it's not a great movie, but
movie.
but it's funny.
It's a movie that sets out to do what it does and does that properly.
Yes, exactly. There you go. It's a terrible movie. It's The Hangover, well before The Hangover came out.
Sure.
10 years before The Hangover came out. But anyways, yeah, you're right. I'm a sucker for the sports thing, and actually that kind of brings me to because what I wanted to do is I wanted to kind of compartmentalize some of the things that make us feel in movies and some of the feelings we get. But before I do that, is there, Paul? But I want to know: is there any movie? And I'm not talking about a heartbreak thing. We've gone through that before.
We've gone that. Yeah.
Is there anything else that you can think of that you've had like a visceral emotional reaction to when you've watched it that you didn't expect? Something that you watched and you were like, man, that really hit me hard, and I wasn't expecting it.
I mean, so I don't want to get so Les Mis. I cried when in the theater. I know it's sad, but I literally cried like 7 times. Man, I was so, and I had never seen
the music
play,
helps. The music
and
helps.
the music.
Sure.
And me and my ex-wife had just gotten into a humongous drag out fight for like 2 days, and had finally decided that we're just going to go watch a movie together and like try to get over it. And we were not doing well, and then that movie came. Like I went and saw that, and it was just like an emotional outpour. It was crazy, and I did not expect that. But I'm actually I'm over here looking at your movies here.
Oh yeah.
Matt, when we first came in, I was like, let me look for some inspiration because
That's a good
changing.
guest tip right there.
Yeah, and I realized because sometimes you forget right when you were younger what you had visceral reactions to, and one movie popped out and I was like, oh my god, I remember this used to make me really emotional, and it's Edward Scissorhands.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
And I started thinking, why did that make me so emotional? And I think it
Music.
was but I also think it was the fact that when I was growing up, I was such an outcast. I was like it was like freaks and geeks and nerds. I was a freak. I was an outcast, right? Which people don't realize now, but I had like long hair, and I
because you're so handsome and not outcast.
No, because
now.
I'm not. Okay, it's
I'm
true
messing with
though.
you.
It's
It's
totally
true.
true.
He was absolutely the Jason Segel of the Freaks and Geeks.
And now he's the John
but I was
Hamm of everything.
I was way less popular than they ever were. And I went to school around here, which was kind of. It was rough around here, like Santa Lucia's. It was rough. It was. I swear to God, it was. So
Rough.
I think Edward Scissorhands always hit me because he was such an outcast, and like he was so misunderstood, and he was. I've always had a lot of empathy, for people. It is something I have just always had. I used to, when I was growing up, if I saw someone like eating alone, because I came from a big family, I'd always tell my mom, like that's so sad. I was so sad for them if I saw like a business guy just eating alone, right? It just tore me up. So I think Edward Scissorhands hit me that hard because he was just like super misunderstood, and he was actually a good guy, and he accidentally I forget what happened. He accidentally cut someone, and then he's like
the kid. He tries to save him from the van that's about to hit him, and he cuts his face.
Right,
up.
and he was living alone. There he was like in like exile up in that house on the hill there. And I also always, growing up, was always like I hated stuff like if it was unfair or misunderstood. Like really irked me. So I think that's one that definitely
a really good
used
one.
to make me very, very emotional.
It is, and it falls into. So there were. I made a list of like movies that I feel are manipulative. They're poorly manipulative, and that they're so they go for easy targets that I don't think make a lot of sense. And what I like about Edward Scissorhands, there's a trope that is very tricky to get by, and Edward Scissorhands falls into it, I think. But I love it, even because of it, maybe because of it. So I think when you have an animal or a character that's like an animal, which is an innocent, a pure innocent that's on film, and Edward Scissorhands is very much he's a dog, right? He can't communicate well. He doesn't talk a lot. He's got these knives for fingers. His primary drive is to do the best he can, and sometimes that doesn't go well for him, and we feel bad for him because of that. And so animals are one of those very easy ones for me that I'm going to always feel an emotional tie for anything bad happening to an animal on screen. I like Edward Scissorhands better because there's more behind it than something like Marley and Me, which is it's fine for what it is, but I'm not going to call it a heartbreaking movie when it's just a fucking. I get it. Like yes, anyone can make a movie about a dog that dies.
Yeah, it's like it's a lab. It's a lab. It's going to happen every 10 years.
Exactly. Yes.
Did you ever? Shit. Did you ever?
That was cold.
Did you?
No, it's true. I had a lab. They're going to die.
Yeah.
It's 9. It's going to be dead soon.
We apologize to any of our listeners out there.
Yeah, anybody with a 9-year-old lab, I'm sorry. Prepare yourself.
Did you? Jesus Christ. Pete is going to call us immediately.
I'm not killing the dog.
9 years old. Put it down, honey.
The weirdest, dark, but funniest thing we've ever gone to.
Did you ever read Did you ever read Garth Franklin's The Art of Racing in the Rain?
No.
It's a book written from the point of view of the dog, and they're making a movie of it. They're making a movie of it.
So
that's like the Weaker Than song from the point of the cat, the tabby.
Yeah, exactly.
So I
So
put
good.
it into that same like bad ones I put in. I put in any of the Romeo and Juliet movies. You need more? Oh, Jesus. Oh my goodness. Just keep it. You're good.
Just keep the bottle, Paul.
No, I think any of the derivations of Romeo and Juliet, which is West Side Story, Titanic, a lot of other movies, I think it's you make conflict out of a real conflict, but then you make resolution out of a fake resolution, which is that we have to kill these characters before there's any time for them to grow.
I'm completely extricating all of that. Like I'm talking about, like, yes, obviously those movies are designed to create an emotional response. I've never felt an emotional response to any of those movies.
No.
You know what?
But a lot of people consider those to be the saddest things ever done.
Titanic didn't do anything for me.
No, but you guys made a great point. Oh, sorry, I never even thought of this. You just made a great point that they killed Jack before she realized just how shitty life was going to be dating a poor person.
That is every one of those stories involves both of the protagonists, both or one of the protagonists dying. So we don't get to see the resolution of what would probably have been a very unappetizing and unrealistic and not very fun.
Eventually she's like, dude, you're a loser.
And like, it doesn't have to be poor. It's just like you've got two people whose initial attraction is attraction. It's fire and romance, and they're really hot about it, and they like it because they're both good looking. And then eventually, like, if that boat doesn't sink, bad shit happens.
So I don't think this is heartbreak, and that's the reason why it wasn't brought up previously. But for as far as emotionally affecting, and I think what one of those strings they lay out there for that type of thing, and what works more effectively for me is dangling the real relationship, the real consequences of the relationship out there, and letting you see it and simmer on it.
Like Revolutionary Road?
Like Revolutionary Road.
That was one of the ones I was thinking about talking about.
Although I would argue in the Heartbreak vein, if we're going to go back to that thing, that the Before series is far better.
Sure.
For that, with Linklater, what he did with the Before series, because even
for those say the Before series.
So the Before series are the 3 movies. It's Before Sunrise, Before Sunset, and Before Midnight.
Ethan Hawke,
and Julie Delpy, made by Richard Linklater. All 3 movies starring the same people at 3 different points in their lives. Now, Before Sunset has a moment. So to set this up for people who haven't seen the movies, the first movie involves 2 young people who meet on a train, end up having this kind of whirlwind 18-hour romance, and then split ways, saying we're going to meet. We're not going to switch numbers. We're not going to switch addresses. We're going to see each other in Greece. We're going to see you there in 9 months. And then it fast forwards. This new movie comes out in 2005 in real time. It's then Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy. He's written a book that's very similar to this thing. He's in Paris doing a book tour. She shows up, and they spend an afternoon together in real time. And the ramifications of that conversation. And then Before Midnight is them married 11 years later with twin girls, with 9-year-old twin girls.
Based on the true story of Ben Wilson and Beth.
I love it.
That's right. It's true.
Before Sunset, the second movie in the series, is one of the most emotionally charged movies I've ever seen. Just because from the first moment that they're first talking, you understand that all they have to go on is the 18 hours they spent together, and then the 9 years they spent romanticizing about that. And everything is subtext. And so the whole time I was waiting on pins and needles, just waiting for when is truth going to start being spoken? Because it's this very clever kind of dance around. We're trying to learn where we are right now as people, but we're also trying to figure out what this meant to us then. Mm-hmm. And there's a moment when they're trying to head back to her place where they say, he's like, I have these dreams where I see you on the side. I'm driving to my wedding, and I see you on the side of the street, and I keep driving by, and I keep driving by, and I keep driving by. And it's like this completely just utterly devastating scene. But it's not a heartbreaking scene because they're revealing where they are in their lives. And their emotional state and their problems that they've had that have been subsequent to that first movie. And that's the reason why the conceit, same as Boyhood, is fucking amazing, because it allows the characters with the actors to grow. And the actors co-wrote all 3 movies.
Sure.
And so it really is just an encapsulation of, and I think that's the reason why it hits me, is because it's like we're watching these people grow as actors, as people, as characters, kind of all simultaneously. But the emotion of thinking about this spontaneous moment that happened 9 or 10 years ago, and the choices that you made then, and the ramifications of how they now, and the way that you've lived your life since then, I think that is super powerful. And that's one of the reasons why I think it's one of the most impactful movies to me. I don't get a feeling of sadness or dread out of that movie. And like I said, I have this little set of movies that have this very esoteric reaction to, where I'm like, I can't really explain it. I know why I love it, but I feel so attached to it, and I think that's the reason why I feel emotional.
And I think there's one that, and I don't know if this is so much universal or not. It may just be a weird Matt thing that I have, but I have a and Beth and I have talked. Ben's wife and I have talked about. Beth and I are very emotional people. If you've ever watched any wedding footage from Ben's wedding, you will see how emotional I can get. And
fortunately for you, there's no footage. We did not have a videographer.
I cried quite a bit during that wedding in tears of joy. Just so happy to be.
I don't know if they were what they were tears of.
They were tears of just being happy to be invited to your wonderful day with your wonderful family.
They were tears from heaven.
And I
think they were tears of he was just upset he couldn't keep drinking for that 40 minutes. He had to stand up there.
They were tears for
the rest of them were shit canned.
Yeah, I was very drunk, but I get very emotionally bare when I drink. But so I have another weird thing.
And literally bear.
And that's it. Not always, sometimes. Not often. No, I have a weird thing with movies where if I'm watching a movie and it gets something right, in my opinion, like it achieves whatever like main goal I was hoping it might achieve in that moment. It's something maybe I haven't seen on screen before. I will literally well up. Like I will start to well up in my eyes of like how great is this moment that's being presented on film. It doesn't even have to be an emotional scene. It's just sometimes something happens in a movie that happens and it makes me super like weepy, but in a very happy way. And that happens to me a lot in really good movies. Sometimes it's just like a lot of times it's an adaptation. Or it's an adaptation of a musical, like whether it's a book or a musical, that they do something on screen that makes me go, fuck, they get the source material, or they get this moment, and this is such a great interpretation of that moment on screen. And it does not have to be emotional.
Yeah. What about you, Paul? I mean, is there anything that you can think of as far as like, I'm thinking about something that gives you that you feel connected to with no necessary, like it's not trying to elicit joy or fear or anything along those lines, but something you feel emotionally attached to that isn't necessarily, it's not something that makes you cry or sad or happy, but something that you just feel attached to as a movie. Nothing? Or a show?
I mean, you put me on the spot, but I think anything with like...
I just want to involve you in the conversation.
No, Road Trip was a really good example of that same kind of thing.
But I would say anything that's like really about camaraderie between like the boys, you know, because I'm very...
Speaking of Linklater.
Yeah,
but I've always been good at making friends and like with, you know...
Stand By Me?
No, so sorry, I'm getting there. So anything that's like coming of age, like with like the adolescent like boys, like you know that are always gonna like love each other and be there for each other, and like even if you know because that's how guys are. Like when I left for Chicago, like I didn't talk to Matt or you, even Matt, especially like or like even John or people for like years. Like it kind of like we kind of just went our separate ways and lived our lives, but. When it comes to like boys,
that's a completely different conversation.
Well, I know
from the guy that didn't return my calls or texts.
No, I know. But like you can. That's on the next episode of A New Way. Let's talk about my emotional reaction to that.
I watched Ben's emotional reaction. That was my movie, and it was very upsetting.
Fuck Paul.
But you can always maybe you took offense to this, but you can always kind of come back to your boys. Like John Reinsvold and I, we didn't talk, like we talked every once in a while, but for years we just kind of like went our separate ways. And even now, like obviously he's got like a totally different life than me, and so do you. Like we live a totally different kind of lifestyle. But like John and I could come back, you know, when his kid's like grown and at you know whatever, up at school, we could probably wind up hanging out every Friday and Saturday again, and it would be like nothing changed, you know.
No, I 100%.
So like those movies about kind of like that camaraderie between the boys. So oh god, it's eluding me. It was recent. It's about these guys.
Tag.
No. Oh God. No.
I love that movie. That movie makes me think of our group 100%.
No,
really
it wasn't. That Tag was such a bad movie. My God.
It doesn't matter if it's a bad movie.
I think it was a bad movie.
I think, but I feel the broness.
The
broness of it feels right to me.
Two movies that I loved, like the bro feel. Boys of Summer. Did you see that?
Boys of Summer is great.
Great movie. That movie, even though it wasn't huge, and most people probably don't know what
Kings
it was.
of Summer, Boys of Summer?
Kings of Summer.
Kings of Summer.
Sorry.
Okay.
Kings of Summer.
Boys of Summer is Don Henley.
I was going to be like, I don't know that adaptation of Don Henley's Boys of Summer.
Kings of Summer. Such a great flick.
It's a great movie.
Loved it. And then like Superbad. You know?
Oh,
totally.
Yeah.
Superbad, you know. I love my best friend Evan. Boop, boop. Like, that just makes me. I could see myself doing that with my friends.
No, and you
have done that with pretty much all of your friends.
You literally that movie specifically it was on my list to talk about. So
Superbad?
So I'm going up to Philadelphia next weekend to see like 5 of my friends from high school I haven't seen in 10 years. One of them was my best friend growing up, Casey August. when Superbad came out, I went to go see it. A bunch of our friends went to go see it. Casey went to go see it. And the week after, we got on like a text thread, and everyone was like, so like, does anyone want to talk about how uncomfortable this movie was, knowing that it was Matt and Casey like to a T? And it literally was. I 100% was the Jonah Hill character. He 100% was Michael Cera. And I mean, like, not just a little bit. There are conversations in that movie where like friends called me and like, were you involved in like, because like we heard you guys have those conversations, and you would have like the fucking sleepovers and the bagel bites. Like, that movie was a window to my soul, unlike anything I've ever seen ever in my entire life. It is my high school experience to a T.
It's a buddy flick, you know. Buddy flicks are great.
No,
buddy flicks are great.
That's why we've gone way over it on the show before, but Chasing Amy is always a movie that makes me emotional because it's the same thing you talk about, Paul. Paul and I are very similar in this, that there is a love of bro love that we like more than almost other types of love.
Oh no, it's not almost for me. It's 100% at this point. That's why I'm perennially single.
I'm in the same boat. We are both.
I'm like,
single.
wait, you want me to hang out with you and
not
on Valentine's
bros?
Day? It's trivia night,
please. Paul and I have spent a couple of Valentine's days together, but no, I like movies that understand how to talk about a friendship love properly, and that is why I legitimately do like the movie Tag, because I feel it very much. It's a flawed, silly, goofy fucking movie, but at its core, the message of like, these are just fucking four dudes that love the shit out of each other, and they're unflinching about it, which doesn't happen a lot in cinema because people get all like weird about men loving men in a non-sexual context.
But I think that whole group, like the Jonah Hill, James Franco group, like they're totally about like it's Jason Segel,
the Apatow.
It's
crew.
totally okay to love the shit out of your friends.
Yeah.
Like they brought that to the forefront. I love it.
Yeah, it is great.
I love it.
Can I talk about a couple of movies that I had an emotional response to? I'm not sure exactly why.
I don't really want to hear any more out of you tonight, but no, I'm just kidding. Yes, go ahead.
I'm going to run through them really quick. Well, just a couple. City of God.
We're doing great on time, by the way.
I know,
Oddly enough, we've actually gone way
I know.
lower on time than I thought we have.
City of God is a movie that I love, and I have a very, very. Have you ever seen that?
I've seen it. Okay,
okay.
I've seen it seven times.
Listen,
I love that movie.
Hold on for a second. The reason why I had to ask Paul if he's seen that is because it's a foreign film. It's a Brazilian film. That came out in 2002. Yeah. There is no reason why Paul should have seen that movie except for the fact that it was a well-known and like well-celebrated movie.
So I'm going to take offense to that one 100%. I watch films with subtitles. I watch foreign films. I am not opposed to that. I'm not some basic bro.
Yes.
City of God is phenomenal. Yeah. Phenomenal. Love it.
But I wasn't trying to elicit offense. I was just saying I was trying to make sure that we were all involved in the same conversation here.
Thank you.
But so that's a movie that I feel like is alternately kind of futile and hopeful, and has a really, I mean, I don't know, the messaging in that movie, especially for somebody who's been to Brazil. And
you're gonna put that card out there.
I've told you before. I've seen the thing. It's weird how
good for you.
Fuck you.
I've been to Brazil, so I get what it's like growing up as a poor kid in Rio de Janeiro.
No, I don't. I know. All I know is I've seen the dichotomy between what the poor and the rich is there, and it's literally separated. Come on,
Matt's getting a little heavy-handed with the sound effects at this point.
But I do have a super visceral emotional reaction to that, and I think part of it is sadness at the end, and part of it's like almost kind of a hopeful thing where you see these people who are kind of pulling themselves up from the doldrums and in whatever way and shape they can. It's a movie that I feel like doesn't have any specific emotional it's a well-made movie to me.
Sure.
I'm going to say one sentence. I feel like agree or disagree. Slumdog Millionaire is like the watered down remake version of City of God.
That's exactly what it is.
I agree with that.
I will
thank you.
100% agree with that. And the other one I was going to say was Being There. There, which is
way old school.
Yeah, it's an old school movie. I'm not sure if you've seen it, Paul. It's Hal Ashby, who was the director, and it's Peter Sellers. And it's such a well-made movie that it on the surface it looks like a comedy, and really the whole movie is just this kind of comment on humanity and a comment on the way that we react to one another. And the end of that movie is
the most iconic ending shots.
Probably the one of the most iconic ending shots of all time. I mean, I think that it would be in the top 10 of all time on any film scholar's list. I'm not going to spoil it for you, Paul. But for those of you that have seen Being There, it's one of those things that you see, and you're like, oh, what? Oh, and then you start to question the entire movie you just watched. Oh, and then you go, oh.
It was like some weird kind of orgasm.
It's Heineken in a can.
But really, in all seriousness, you start to question the whole entire movie you just watched, and I love the fact that I have a moment where I have to kind of compress myself. I've seen the movie 10 times now.
Sure.
And every time for like 10 minutes, I just want to sit by myself for 10 minutes and just think.
Well, and that's the question I have for you guys right now. So, Paul, is there a movie, and I don't mean to make the her joke again, but is there a movie that you know is going to fuck you up before you watch it again, but you can't help yourself because it hits something and you have to watch it again. You're compelled to go through that experience again, no matter whether it's good, bad, or whatever it is.
I think you should redirect that question to somebody that he's met at Bull Bar before.
Wait, what?
And Paul is the name of the movie.
What?
Sorry.
I don't understand that joke.
Wait, I don't understand.
I don't understand that joke at all.
Did you not just listen? Okay, to what you said. You're like, I know what I'm going to experience, but I'm going to go through it again. All right. I know exactly what the end result's going to be.
That was pretty good. But
I'm sorry.
Do you have a movie, Paul, that you know is gonna wreck you a little bit? So similar to Her, right? Obviously, Her, you know, is going to wreck you a bit, but you're going to watch it again just because you got to watch it again. Do you have something that you're kind of a glutton for punishment on?
I don't know if it's every, because I don't see it that often, but American Beauty.
Oh yeah, that's a really good one.
And I didn't really get, and I wish I had a better answer for that question, because
okay.
if I had more time,
answer.
if I had more time to think, I probably would come up with one that would be a little bit more relevant to that question. But American Beauty is another one that when I watched it, you know, I didn't quite get it when it first came out, because I wasn't, you know, like
a middle-aged
married man in a unfulfilled sexual and you know, life and marriage life and all that kind of stuff. But I eventually became that, and
I did not mean to.
I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
Terrible.
So I'm not. I guess I'm 37, ladies. Just let you know.
Don't start flirting with it. Don't start picking up our audience.
I'm sure there's a hot one out there.
Oh,
Before the end, he's going to be
Christ.
like, do your listeners like muscles?
Because underneath this layer of fat, I've got some.
The most beautiful thing I've ever seen is Paul Mamelito watching a bag roll through the wind.
Right.
Yeah.
So that movie always gets to me, you know, later on, a little, you know, like 10 years later or whenever, when I rewatched it and kind of like got it, you know, like Ben's been married once, but he's happy. He's got a lovely wife. You've never been married. So I feel like maybe I'm the only one that's been in like that. It's almost like not that my ex was a bad person, great person, but when you realize that you're unhappy and then it's almost like a prison. You're like, oh my God, what am I supposed to do if I leave? I'm a bad person, and frankly, I did when I eventually did leave. You know, there were some people that years later were like, we really didn't like you for a while because you left her.
Kramer versus Kramer?
Right. So American Beauty,
Champ?
just gets to me on that level because he's just there's nothing like outwardly wrong with his life. He's just in like an unfulfilled.
He's in a rut.
He's in an unfulfilled relationship. You know, he's like sorry to be
Don't apologize.
I'm sorry to be vulgar, but he's jerking off in bed next to his wife because she won't have sex with him, and he's jerking off in the shower, and she's yelling at him for it. Yet she won't have sex with him, and he's like, fantasizing over this young girl, which is pedophiliac and kind of sick, but at the same time, it's like because
he can't even go through with it though.
Yeah,
once he gets to that point,
because then he realizes what the hell's going on. He's having it's like a midlife crisis at the same time. So it's just kind of a heartbreaking movie if you think about it. And then he eventually, what his demise is because even his neighbor was going through this, of something different but also similar, just living in a prison, like a self-constructed prison.
Yeah,
and that's the scariest thing in the world to me. I've gone through it once. It's the scariest thing in the world.
Well, it's one of the few movies whose trailer 100% lays out exactly what the movie is, which is called Look Closer. I don't even remember the trailer. It was to the Who. It was to a Who track, but the whole thing was about Look Closer. And so the idea was that you're watching all of these people in their daily lives, and you're thinking one thing about them, but if you look closer, you find out that under the seams there are these like terrible things that are happening.
You know the thing, and this will matter. You know the thing about this is going to sound like totally off, but the thing about like getting high these days, why I don't, is because I start thinking like layers deep. Like I start looking at things like in like that American Beauty type scope. Like I look at everything like I can't look at it at the surface level. I have to dig deep and find like what's really going on, and then everything becomes that to me, right? Everything becomes like there's this underlying like seethy like terrible undertone of like regret and unhappiness and like discontent. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's what American Beauty like represents to me. It's like on the surface everything looks great, but we've all got these just demons that are just terrible.
Yeah, but I think eventually you also start to realize
you're a pessimist.
I'm not gonna. I'm a pessimist through and through.
No, but other than the pessimist side of it, there's really just idea to be like, yes, the image we present is not the image that actually exists, but oftentimes the image that actually exists is just fine. Like it's not, maybe it doesn't have the veneer of the Instagram or or Facebook or whatever's going on with that, but it's just fine. It's functional. Functional is a terrible word to say. Something's good. Yeah. Functional is the worst word you can use for that. But you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. So I have a few movies I just want to briefly mention, just because.
Few more. He said he did it last time. I was doing it this time.
No, I appreciate that.
There are three movies I had super visceral reactions to, and they all involve very short, very brief, funny stories.
You have 60 seconds for each movie.
Okay, I have less than that, actually.
I'm about to have a visceral reaction.
I'm going to talk about three movies where I was awkwardly walked in on, bawling my eyes out for whatever emotional reason.
I think you're saying bawling your girlfriend.
Yeah.
Balls deep in his own hand.
Balls deep. Yeah. One is Donnie Darko. I finished watching that movie, and I had a very strange reaction to that movie, and I think it's more about futility. And all three of these movies are about futility. I think the hardest I've ever been hit by movies are when it's like your life or the consequences of actions are futile.
That's
no.
the complete opposite.
No, of Donnie Darko. No,
Donnie
it's not.
Darko.
No. So here's the thing. Donnie Darko has relatively an uplifting message, but then it gets to that last sequence.
Oh, where they recognize each other?
Where they recognize each other, and then there's the slight wave. And even though
which is even better, his death means even more to them.
It doesn't. They don't actually recognize each other, though.
They do.
No. Richard Kelly said they don't recognize each other.
Richard Kelly doesn't know what he set up doing that movie.
So
right?
Exactly, it's true. But he said it was an echo. He called it an echo, and he said that there was something that made them connected to one another, but they didn't actually recognize one another.
Because they were impacted by his act. Coming up in our next Donnie Darko centric episode, we'll delve into this deeper. But
okay, Requiem for a Dream, another. Yep. My mom was gardening. I walked out of the room bawling, and she thought like a family member had died, or that like something was wrong with me.
How did that conversation go, honey? What's wrong?
A movie. It was a movie.
Double dildo.
Double dildo.
I knew the joke was going there, and I loved it. I was waiting for it to happen because I was going to do it if you were.
I mean, but tell me if that movie doesn't fucking wreck you at the end of the movie. It's the most depressing movie I've ever seen in my entire life, and it absolutely wrecked me.
Well, it's Darren Aronofsky. That's what he does. He's like, hey, you like life? Watch my movie.
Ironically, the other one I was going to bring up is The Fountain, which in a different way, but in a completely different way. Guys, stop doing that.
I didn't know it was playing.
It's not guys. It's him. He's got the soundboard.
Matt.
Sorry, I didn't know it was playing. Sorry.
But The Fountain was also futility in a different way. A futility of a kind of abandoning all self and being like any sort of resistance to what the future is going to bring is futile, and I should just let things happen. I think that's ultimately what The Fountain is all about, which is a Darren Aronofsky movie. But that is a movie that affected me very profoundly that I did not expect to affect me at all. I didn't foresee that one bit. And I cried my eyes out in the theater 3 times watching that movie, thinking at first I was just like, maybe it was a weird place when I watched the movie the first time. And I saw it like a week later and was like, yeah, this movie just hits me in a way that's kind of super specific. So
I think I watched it with you the second or third time.
Yeah, I'm sure you did.
Now,
same thing with Pan's Labyrinth.
Oh, that was on my list. That movie hit me pretty hard too.
Yeah, Pan's Labyrinth though. I'm from Pan's Labyrinth. I cry more about the narrative path of the loss of innocence.
Yeah, it's in my wheelhouse of things that emotionally impact me.
I feel like that movie's about
metaphorically.
It's more metaphorically about the loss of innocence, which is something I think that's more of a traditional narrative path. Those previous movies I mentioned.
No, you're in your and I'm a sucker for all of those ones, whether it's Labyrinth or it's anything that's Alice in Wonderland is kind of the inception kind of of that idea. But Pan's Labyrinth does it in a way that like hit me.
Yeah, sure.
It definitely caught me off guard, and I was just like, "Fuck." Yeah. Paul, what else is on your list, Paul?
Anything else?
I mean, just if we're going down the path of like again, like joy. I love Inglourious Bastards because I just love the idea that like it could have ended that way, you know, and like just
a fantasy.
100%.
Yeah, it's a fantasy. And then like I mean, there's been a lot of and as a you know. White man, a straight white man, it's like hard to like say like, oh, this movie has a visceral reaction because it's not like my story or my what I've gone through. No, but like any movie that's like The Pianist or Pianist, or like 12 Years a Slave, like that movie was just heartbreaking through and through. And I think the main point obviously is even though it's about slavery and this guy getting pulled in when he was already a free man. It's about the injustice of it, right? Injustice always gets me, like, and especially injustice to the point where, and they can't seem to win, right? Like he never really wins. He gets away. He never really wins.
No, that's not. It's not a positive end.
No,
to that,
it's
that
not a positive end. He
survives.
He survived it. Yeah,
he didn't get away.
Yeah, same thing with any movies about
that's why movies of survival aren't hopeful movies.
Right, movies about
Saving Private Ryan.
Jews surviving the Holocaust. It's not like they lost everybody. They survived. Yeah. So like they get to live, but that's it. That's all they got out of the deal. Just to live.
No, that's the thing I like most about the framing story in Saving Private Ryan, which you can say is 100% very manipulative. But what I like is that the frame around that movie is one man saying we're presented with this issue in the movie. Is the mission more important than the man when the mission is the man, right? This idea of does one outweigh the needs of the many or whatever it is, right? And you have this one character that you get to the end of the movie, you're thinking is probably the captain, right? Which they cut that very specifically in the beginning of the movie, that it cuts from him looking in the grave to Tom Hanks. So you're like, oh, well, it's going to be the captain, him on the other end of it. But it's not. It's the one guy that fucking lived out of all of the guys that came to rescue him. And he's dealing with the last words of the person saying, earn this. So his entire life is that I didn't deserve to be saved. all of these people died specifically just for me. And the last words of the guy one of the last guys that died is, earn this. And that's his breakdown at the end of the movie is, he asks his wife, did I live a good life? Like, was I a good person? Did I fucking do this shit? And you don't like this.
I understand the thesis. I just don't like the bookends.
And see, that bookend for me killed me.
I'm on Matt's page. The parts that got me
killed me.
That got me emotionally were the bookends.
I don't like the bookends.
That was the part that got me because it was like the culmination.
But
of it all,
that gets back to it is because it's an easy emotional bait. I think at that.
No,
point.
you're correct. It is the puppet strings on there, but it also makes me think about the war in a different way than any other way I would have. To be like, and so there's a very briefly, 60-second story. The guys that were in that movie, they were the grunts in Saving Private Ryan, had to go through a boot camp, right? This very intense boot camp that Spielberg specifically did not put Matt Damon through, so that when Matt Damon showed up on set, the rest of them would hate him, they're supposed to in the movie, which is fucking just genius direction.
You're talking about Vin Diesel and
all of them, Barry Pepper, everybody went through it, right? And there was a guy there, the guy that was driving them through it, and he goes, your friend next to you just got shot. What's your feeling? Like, what's your reaction? They're like, well, I felt like guilt, and they're like, I know, I felt like upset. And he goes, no, you felt happy, because that's the first thing that happened to you is that you realize it was them and not you, and you were still alive, and you have to deal with that for the rest of your life. That your first reaction to someone dying wasn't me, and that's to me the end of that movie is 100% the guy that made it past all of that shit for no good reason. Paul's urinating over in the corner during this, but that definitely stuck with me. But I've the one I have to get to before, and I will let everyone get to closing thoughts after it. But there's one I have to talk about, which Ben might know where I'm going with this one, but it's another Tim Burton movie, but it's the Tim Burton movie that broke me above all other Tim Burton movies, and that's Big Fish. And Big Fish, I watch. So my dad passed away a few years ago, but even before that,
can we just throw Big Fish and Field of Dreams in the same sort of?
Field of Dreams is right next.
It's the same lot.
They're literally next to. They are, except that Big Fish does something a little bit different than Field of Dreams does. Field of Dreams
but very similar.
Similar. Field of Dreams says, "What if I could have been friends with my dad? What would it be like?" And Big Fish is more of, I've known my dad my entire life, but what if I actually knew the truth about my dad? How would that change our relationship together?
Right. Okay.
And I think those are very diametrically different things.
Okay.
Big Fish for me, I remember watching that the first time, and I went with a group of like 7 of our friends, and I was inconsolably fucked up watching the movie. They're like, what is it? And I'm like, I don't know. But like something about that movie I think it spoke very much similar as to Field of Dreams of not necessarily relating to your parent figure, but finding out too late how you relate to your parental figure. Right. And that's really what you're right in that both movies take that same stance. What happens if you only connect with your father when it's too late?
That's, I mean, to me, the whole sequence where Billy Crudup talks him through his death,
man,
and the scene where Ray Kinsella meets his father and just says, like, look at him, he has his whole life in front of him. You say they're diametrically opposed, but I feel like they're not. I feel like the difference is that two sides of the same coin.
I think the difference is that they're two sides of the same coin. The difference in Big Fish is that he's grown up believing his father's a bullshit artist. Versus Field of Dreams, there's no idea that
he didn't like his dad. He hated his dad.
He didn't like him, but it didn't. There was never any moment of untruth. I like that. I think what happens. What I like in Big Fish over Field of Dreams to get for me that makes me feel a little bit more is that his dad is this larger than life personality, and he's like, "Fuck you, you're not." You're not. It's all lies. It's all bullshit. It's all ridiculous. Just fucking fess up and be honest about who you are because it's affecting me. I know who I am. I know I'm the son of you, but I'm not the son of the that version you present out to everyone else. And that's a very different dynamic to say, like, I'm not going to live up to this bullshit standard that you've like faked for everyone else.
No, I'm with you.
That's a little bit different, and somehow that hit me a little bit more, and not even so much on a personal level, but just like it was very interesting to me to watch that dynamic. And I mean, and that movie ends on just such a hopeful, sad but hopeful note, and that's why it's one of those properties I will say is very much a positive message, but it's difficult to get through.
Yeah, I'm with you.
All right,
I understand. I mean, like I said, I still stick by. I feel like those movies are two sides of the same coin, but.
They're not Lunar Park, which is a whole other side of that argument. But
that movie has not been made yet. So
I think if Lunar Park is ever made,
I think we're 2 years away from that movie being made.
And if someone makes it basically makes, we will dedicate a podcast to Lunar Park, Field of Dreams, Big Fish. As far as
I don't think Paul has ever read Lunar Park.
Nah,
you should. It's wonderful. I have it in the house right now.
Is that the daddy issue one?
Yes. It is. I don't want to scare you.
Do we all have daddy issues, the three of us?
We do, but
I don't have any daddy issues.
I feel like
I do. But I will say this, Paul.
Actually, my dad was the one who showed me Field of Dreams the first time and explained to me why it was so poignant. Because the reason why I am emotional about Field of Dreams is because my father could never connect with his father. They were so on different pages. My father or my grandfather was this hardcore, like conservative, just old school World War II vet. Like wouldn't talk to him, and would like if my dad showed a bit of emotion, would fucking smack him, and it was just this old school guy, and they hated each other.
I was gonna say the apple has fallen far from the tree in 2 generations.
Well,
it's true.
Talking about it, being emo. That's what I mean.
No, right? Okay,
that's a good thing.
Yeah.
No, I think my dad.
But yes. Yeah. So my dad obviously didn't raise me that way, but he explained to me that when I first saw the movie. So I don't, because I feel close to my father. Like my father and I are close. I don't feel anything like that type of emotion of disconnect. But I understand feeling like you came somewhere, not understanding why that disconnect should exist or has to exist with some people, and that's the thing. It's still an affecting movie for me, but it doesn't speak to me.
We're gonna have to get our daddy's podcast on here at some point. And,
let's get it. Let's get it. Can I come back for the daddy issue?
So
podcast?
Here's the thing for daddy issue. My dad listens to the podcast, by the way. So
hi Scott.
So I think we just gotta get my dad and B.O.B. on here.
I mean, that would be fantastic.
My dad's been dead since 1981.
But B.O.B. is still...
B.O.B., come on.
Well,
that's a whole nother podcast.
I will get my dad on here one way or another. It's going to take a lot of necromancy, but I will make it happen, and we're going to figure it out. But it's...
Okay.
If that... That's, I mean, yes.
God.
It's a good point to end the podcast.
That's probably the way you end the podcast, right?
Yep.
That's the way we end the podcast there, on there. But I think there is, as with a few of our other podcasts, there's more conversation to be had on this topic. So we'll probably revisit this at some point and do another follow-up on another All the Feels Part 2. And we'll figure it out that way. But we want to thank, first of all, Mr. Paul Manolito.
Thank you
for joining us on this podcast tonight and delivering some gems, some unheard of movies we probably would not have talked about. And we want to thank our listeners for continuing to tune in to the New Wave Podcast. We have, as always, lots coming up this year that we're trying to pull off, and better sound, better equipment, better reach out to some other podcasts that I've been talking
better
to
reach
recently.
Rounds.
We've offered a few reach rounds to some other people out there that want to get on the podcast. But again, if you are listening as a regular, other than Ryan, Greg, Haley, Benstad, anyone else, anyone that and even if it's you guys, please send us an email or whatever you want to. What do you want to hear us talk about for an hour and a half next time. That's what we'll do. We will prepare. We will do what you ask of us. We are your slaves of duty, and not duty, but duty. That's all laugh way too hard at duty on that one. But anyway, thanks, Jesus Almighty. Thanks so much for listening to New Wave Podcast. I am Matt Shank.
I'm Ben.
Oh, I'm Paul.
Oh boy, that was. Can you believe that wasn't rehearsed at all? And we are the New Wave Podcast. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next week.
Cheers.
Cheers. Paul, say cheers.
Cheers.